Welcome to Current Conversations, a podcast imagined by Be Alive and Rivers Are Life, where we discuss freshwater systems, the important role that rivers and watersheds play in our world, and how educating conservationists leads to a healthier planet. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode and for being part of a ripple of action that's creating change. I'm Julie Regeski, Impact Manager for Be Alive and Rivers Are Life, and co-host of our show.
And I'm Arielle Roth, Community Manager and your co-host of the show. In today's episode, we are catching up with Adam Lindquist. Adam was featured in the Rivers Are Life film, Mr. Trash Wheel, and works for the Waterfront Partnership of Baltimore, where he's led the Healthy Harbor initiative for the past 12 years. He founded the Great Baltimore Oyster Partnership, is leading the development of the Baltimore Blueway, and co-created the famous Mr. Trash Wheel, the Baltimore Harbor's googly-eyed, sustainably powered floating trash interception.
So I got to know Adam and Mr. Trash Wheel in 2023 when they hosted the film's world premiere in Baltimore, but we'll be seeing him and his team again soon at this year's Baltimore Flotilla, which Rivers Are Life is proud to sponsor. So stay tuned for more details on that and enjoy the episode. Welcome, Adam. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. I figure we might as well start at the very beginning. You grew up in central New York. And, you know, it seems like it really influenced you, your life, your love of nature and the outdoors. Could you talk about that a little bit and what that was like for you?
Sure. I grew up in what's known as the Finger Lakes region. So it's an area really defined by water. We've got these beautiful lakes. And then maybe people are familiar with like Ithaca, New York. And they've got this saying, you know, Ithaca is gorges. Not Ithaca has gorges, which would be grammatically correct, but play on words there. So it literally is an area that is just full of these beautiful waterfalls, just stunning landscapes that are defined by water. And I think without even being intentional about it, I just grew up very connected to, swimming in waterfalls, swimming in lakes, and just making that part of my life. I think like when I was a kid, you always had like a satellite image poster up on your wall of the Finger Lakes. And that was really cool in the 1980s. Now anybody can pull up like Google Earth and see that. But at the time, that was like a really cool poster to have, to see the region you live in as viewed from space. And, you know, it really helps you to start thinking about watersheds and how water is connected to our world and how we're connected to water. So anyway, that's just in a nutshell what kind of I think initially got me interested in protecting and cleaning up waterways.
Yeah, and so that has obviously all led you to your career now. Could you give us some insights and kind of explain your positions and what you do with the Waterfront Partnership of Baltimore, and also some insights into leading the Healthy Harbor initiative?
You bet. So when I got out of college, I had started volunteering for watershed organizations. I actually lived in Providence, Rhode Island at the time. And I realized that was really where my heart lay. I had studied actually music business when I was an undergraduate. And while I certainly love music, and I'm grateful for the business classes I took, I realized that I was more interested in pursuing environmentalism. So I went to the University of College Park, where I got my master's degree in community planning with a focus on water resource planning. So really looking at how regions use the water that they have to meet their basic needs, but also their recreational needs. I worked for a time at the Maryland Department of Planning, reviewing water resource plans for the municipalities of the state of Maryland, and ultimately ended up doing an internship at a place called the Center for Watershed Protection, who had been hired by Waterfront Partnership to create a plan to clean up the Baltimore Harbor and make it swimmable and fishable in 10 years, which was a very aggressive goal given the problems that the Baltimore Harbor faces. So I worked on that plan, and I thought it was a really interesting plan. So I actually reached out to the president of Waterfront Partnership because I was looking for a job. And our president, Lori Schwartz, brought me on board. And this was back in 2011 to really lead the Healthy Harbor initiative. It was actually like a part-time gig when I started and then transitioned into a full-time job. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And it's been a really rewarding and fruitful effort to clean up the Baltimore Harbor. And one thing I'll say, I don't want to talk for too long, but one thing I'll say about the Waterfront Partnership's role in environmental restoration is that we are what's known as a business improvement district, which means that we have an area around the Baltimore waterfront that we are responsible for cleaning and maintaining. And we're actually led by the downtown business community. So I always think that's a really unique part of our role in cleaning up the environment, is that we are basically working as an environmental nonprofit under the leadership and direction of the developers and property owners around Baltimore's waterfront, who have realized that there's huge business benefit to having a clean and recreational waterway out on their doorstep.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just telling the team how, Mr. Trash Wheel and your like, there's such a huge fan base. Like, there's so many people that want to be involved in all of these initiatives that you've worked on. I mean, it's community engagement like I've never seen it before. It's absolutely incredible. Could you talk about how some of these initiatives that so many members of the community are involved in, like the Great Baltimore Oyster Partnership, the Baltimore Blueway, Mr. Trash Wheel, how have these directly contributed to the health of Baltimore's waterways?
Well, I have to give a lot of credit to especially the chair of the Healthy Harbor Initiative, Michael Hankin, who is the CEO of an investment firm that's headquartered here in Baltimore. And he really is the one who set out this goal of like, let's make the harbor swimmable and fishable by the year 2020. And I love the kind of big, hairy, audacious goal setting there. And also the status quo is not going to do this. We need to try different things. So that was a really exciting time to come into this job, when you had this kind of direction to try new things. Don't do what everyone else is doing. Got creative, and I really started to think, like, what are the different ways that we can engage as many people as possible in the cleanup and restoration of the Baltimore Harbor. So the Great Baltimore Oyster Partnership was one of the first things that I created, because I really wanted people to see life in the Baltimore Harbor. And when you grow a baby oyster in the Baltimore Harbor, we grow them for about 9 months of their life. And we grow them in cages that hang off of piers and docks and the promenade around the waterfront. And inside each cage can be up to 500 baby oysters, which we call spat on shell. We do this in partnership with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and we grow about 300,000 oysters in the Baltimore Harbor every single year. Once they mature, we transplant them out into the Chesapeake Bay onto a protected oyster sanctuary reef, where they won't be harvested for food. They will just spend their lives filtering water and providing habitat. And when I started this program, the first thing I heard were a lot of people telling me, no, oysters are all going to die. The harbor is too polluted. Like, this is a bad idea. But thankfully, I found I reached out to a couple different oyster-based nonprofits, and thankfully the Chesapeake Bay Foundation said, what's the hurt in giving it a try? So we tried, and that first year we held our breath, like, are these oysters going to survive? And what we found was we had an 85-90% survival rate in that first year, which was huge, because in the wild, these baby oysters have like a 2% survival rate. So we're giving oysters a huge head start on life by growing them in the Baltimore Harbor, of all places. And so we've been expanding that program ever since. I think we started with like 50,000 oysters. Now we're up to 300,000 oysters. And the key for me is that we implement this program in a way that engages the most people. So it's very volunteer based. Oyster gardens are adopted by downtown businesses. Every month we have multiple oyster gardening days for the public to come out, and they see, oh my God, these oysters are getting bigger, and there's all this other life that congregates around our oyster cages. So we pull up a cage full of baby oysters, and you'll see grass shrimp hopping out of the cage. You'll see mud crabs living inside the cage. You'll see blue crabs hanging on outside of the cage. We don't want our blue crabs in our cages because they would eat our baby oysters. But you get exposed to all this life in the Baltimore Harbor, and it's a real aha moment. And I think I'm always trying to create those aha moments for people with the Baltimore Harbor. Like, oh, it's not a toxic wasteland. If we put oysters in here, they will grow and get bigger. If I touch the water, my skin doesn't melt off. If I go swimming in this water, I'm actually fine the next day. These are all different experiences that we try and bring to the people of Baltimore City.
Mr. Trashwheel is obviously a huge part of that. I think we all know that. We all know he's very viral. And we were just talking to our studio team about this, about how, like, He's had beers named after him and created over him. He's viral. There's a whole song I heard that you sing. We're hoping you have your guitar and can maybe do a little rendition of it for us. But how has that viral aspect of Mr. Trash Wheel really contributed to raising awareness of water health in Baltimore?
Like I said, I'm so excited. I have a copy. This is an advanced copy. This comes out next week. It's a Dr. Seuss book. All about eco inventions, green machines, and other amazing eco inventions. Features Mr. Trash Wheel on the cover, and there is some prose about Mr. Trash Wheel in here as well. So, I mean, this is just incredible to. I mean, if this isn't peak Trash Wheel, I don't know what is. Having Dr. Seuss. I mean, we always said we wanted a children's book about Mr. Trash Wheel. But I mean, I guess aim high because, I don't think we can do any better.
Not than Dr. Seuss, no.
In a Dr. Seuss book. So that's phenomenal. Yeah, Mr. Trash Wheel was a lot of fun. And I've been with that project since its inception back in 2014, when this giant floating, sustainably powered trash interceptor was installed at the end of a stream called the Jones Falls, which flows into the Baltimore Harbor. So the Baltimore Harbor, the Jones Falls, has about a 60 square mile watershed, and the watershed being the area of land that drains to a single point. And it's a very urban environment. And the way our storm drain system works, when it rains, trash from our streets goes into our storm drains and it doesn't get filtered out. It doesn't go to a treatment plant. It just goes right into our streams and then into the harbor. So especially on rainy days, it just looked like you could walk across the harbor on all of the trash that was floating. And thankfully, local inventor, a guy named John Kellett, came up with this idea that we could harness the power of the river to sustainably power a giant interceptor. And I like to point out, Mr. Trash Wheel doesn't go around looking for trash, right? He stays at the end of a river or stream, waits for the trash to come to him, and then the trash is funneled to the front of Mr. Trash Wheel with a series of booms, and then there's a rake and conveyor system that pick the trash up out of the water and put it into a dumpster so that it can be safely disposed of. And last year, we picked up over 1 million tons of trash and debris from the Baltimore Harbor. Not just with Mr. Trash Wheel, but we actually have four trash wheels total. So there's Mr. Trash Wheel, Professor Trash Wheel, Captain Trash Wheel, and Gwenda, the Good Wheel of the West. So basically, to get to your question here about the engagement, sorry, I felt like some background is helpful.
It is helpful if people haven't seen our film.
What Mr. Trash Wheel is, right. So in terms of engagement, at the time Mr. Trash Wheel came along, I'm always looking for how can we make these things more engaging? And I had no idea how to make a trash interceptor into a compelling and engaging piece of infrastructure. But I went out there and shot a video, put it up on the internet, and it went to #1 on Reddit.
You're the reason Mr. Trash Wheel went viral?
I mean, I don't know, probably someone was going to have to shoot a video, right? It was an interesting thing to see. This was early days. There were no googly eyes. We didn't call it Mr. Trash Wheel. But yeah, that first video went viral and we were very excited and needed to figure out how to build on one viral video because, of course, we didn't capture anybody. Everyone watched the video and moved on to other things. So where do we go from here? And we actually invited in a bunch of creative firms to pitch ideas. We said, hey, we've got a viral video. What should we do next? And it was a firm called What Works that came to us and suggested that we give the device a Twitter account. And we're a small nonprofit and starting a Twitter account doesn't cost any money. So we thought, let's try that approach. And we had to figure out what to name the device. And I suggested we call it Mr. Trash Wheel. And then I built the first set of googly eyes in my basement and had my staff go out and hold them up on poles so we could see what this trash interceptor would look like with giant googly eyes. And, people freaking loved it. And the rest is history. We put permanent googly eyes up on Mr. Trash Wheel, and there's a literal cult following for Mr. Trash Wheel in Baltimore. People who dress up in black robes and bring litter to Mr. Trash Wheel. There's a song, as you mentioned, written by Jonathan Jensen from the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, which is so catchy. I'm actually going to be performing it not this weekend, next weekend at the book release for our Dr. Seuss book. So I'm looking forward to singing it with a bunch of kids at the Enoch Pratt Library here in Baltimore. And yeah, it's been so powerful because we've taken a very negative issue, right? Trash in the water, and turned it into something that people can feel good about. Like, oh, here's a solution. Like, we're solving this problem, but there's so much more we can do. And I think that's really important too, is that we're not just out there picking up trash. We're working every year on policy that will actually reduce the amount of litter ending up in the Baltimore Harbor to begin with. We helped Maryland become the first state in the country to ban styrofoam takeout containers. We've helped ban plastic bags in Baltimore City and Baltimore County. We are actually, one of our staff is testifying today to try and create a bottle deposit program here in Maryland, because plastic bottles are one of the number one pieces of litter we pull out of the Baltimore Harbor.
Yeah, I think it's important. I love what you mentioned about there being so much that's going on behind the scenes, because if somebody finds Mr. Trash Wheel, of course, they fall in love immediately, but there's so much other work that you're doing. And I think it's incredible, but it's important to remember that Mr. Trash Wheel is adorable and lovable and all these things, but at its core, it's doing a really important thing. So I wonder if you could get into the details. And I remember some of Mr. Trash Wheel's early tweets about what it was that he was collecting, what he absorbed. So, I mean, like, could you talk about, what are some of the things that all the Trash Wheel family, what other than styrofoam now, because that's hopefully not as much of an issue, what are some of the things that they're taking in, and what are the challenges you still face with that debris?
So in terms of styrofoam, like, one of the things I love is that we've been tracking how much trash and what kinds of trash Mr. Trash Wheel has been pulling out of the harbor since day one. If you go to mrtrashwheel.com, you can look at a spreadsheet of every dumpster we've ever taken out of the harbor. And what's great is then you get this before and after picture of what's happened before and after you've implemented new legislation. So we know that the amount of foam containers has dropped by 90% at our trash wheel. So that's terrific to then go back to people who passed these laws and say, look at the impact this law has had. It's working. It's keeping trash out of the Chesapeake Bay. Other than that, we still have a lot of issues. Plastic bottles. I think what I would say is, you used to look in a trash wheel dumpster and it was all white from all the foam. And now that the foam is gone and it's no longer white, what you can see is what was hiding just underneath that foam, which turned out to be hundreds of thousands of plastic bottles. We've collected 1.8 million plastic bottles since we started. And through this legislative process that we're going through right now to hopefully implement a bottle deposit law in Maryland, I've also learned that is 0.05% of the plastic bottles that end up as trash or litter in the state of Maryland. So even though it sounds like a phenomenal number of plastic bottles, and it is, it's still less than 1% of the bottles that we could be recycling with a beverage deposit law. So the other thing, cigarette butts are a huge problem. And that one is probably the problem that seems most intractable, because you're not going to have a cigarette butt deposit program. You can't ban smoking. So what can you do to address cigarette litter? And then we've picked up more cigarette butts than anything else, just by sheer number, like 14 million cigarette butts we pulled out of the harbor. And that's probably undercounted. So we are working with the city of Baltimore and a legal team who is currently suing cigarette manufacturers to help to compel them to help fund the cleanup of cigarette butts, recognizing that there is no way to feasibly, get consumers to, not throw cigarette butts on the ground. I don't know how that lawsuit's going to go, but I think it's great that the Trash Wheel has really inspired the city to take on that lawsuit, because they have this data showing the impact that cigarette butts have on the Baltimore Harbor.
And so obviously all of that trash that you guys have cleaned up is leading to something that you have mentioned to us, which is having the first public swim in the Baltimore Harbor in over 40 years. So aside from just the trash wheels, cleaning up all the trash in the harbor, other things initiatives you have done, what steps are being taken to achieve that project specifically? And what significance would it hold for the community?
Yeah, so we're really taking a holistic approach to cleaning up the Baltimore Harbor. And the trash is the most visible thing, but we know we need to be working on stormwater runoff, and we need to be working on the city's aging sewer system. Parts of our sewer system are over 100 years old. It needs a lot of upgrades. And we have a great steering committee that's co-chaired by the Department of Public Works here in Baltimore, who is the entity responsible for our sewer system. And we have helped really elevate major sewer repairs within city government to make sure that the sewer projects that are going to have the greatest impact on water quality in the harbor are prioritized. And indeed, there's one particular project which results in, 90 to 95% of the sewage overflows that happen in Baltimore. And we helped prioritize that project. The city spent something like $800,000 on that project. And it went into effect, the fix went into effect a couple of years ago. And since that time, we've seen a huge reduction in the amount of sewage discharging from our sewer system. And something like 95% reduction in sewage overflows. So that has been a game changer for water quality in the Baltimore Harbor. And we know that because we test water quality 5 days a week at 5 sites around the harbor, which is more than I've ever heard anybody testing for bacteria levels specifically. Like a beach probably tests for bacteria levels like maybe once or twice a month. So to be doing it 5 days a week has given us the most comprehensive data set on the health of the Baltimore Harbor and how safe it is for recreation, which is why last September, myself and a bunch of other advocates jumped into the Baltimore Harbor to kind of test out, like, what's going to happen? Are we going to survive? And I can, attest that we are all still here, whatever it is, 9 months later, we're still here. And we are so excited to be bringing that concept to the public this summer. So we're hosting, we're going to again jump into the harbor, but hopefully do it with a much larger group of people. At an event we call Harbor Splash this summer.
That's exciting. You mentioned aging sewage infrastructure and bacteria testing, and those are the kind of issues you see all over the country, if not the world. My work experience has been involved with that in the past. And so I wonder if you could comment on, Mr. Trashwheel is almost like the dream scenario for so many nonprofits and organizations and grassroots groups who are hoping to gain attention and awareness for their specific issues. What advice would you have to people hoping to get that kind of attention, engagement, that community rallying that you all have achieved? What tips could you give them?
Right. Well, you can't just go around putting googly eyes on everything you've learned.
Why not, Adam?
I think it's a good plan. Good strategy.
But the thing that I've really taken away from this work is that we love hardcore environmentalists. They are the core of our support, but you really need to cast a wider net if you want to create systemic change in a system like Baltimore City. And that's what Mr. Trashwheel has allowed us to do. Instead of just hardcore environmentalists supporting our work, the ways that Mr. Trashwheel reaches out to people and connects with people is so much greater than anything I could have ever imagined, right? Because there's plenty of adults who are obsessed with Mr. Trashwheel, but then there's all these like school kids. I have a 4-year-old now, and like now that I have a 4-year-old, I see it like, oh my God, this kid, like nothing could be more interesting to this kid than a giant machine eating trash in the harbor. So there are schools that do their own projects. We don't even have to ask schools to do a Mr. Trashwheel project. You go into a Baltimore City school, they're going to be talking about Mr. Trashwheel, whether they engage with us or not. So I would just say that by making it fun and using humor, we've been able to reach a much broader audience than just your traditional environmentalists and bring them into the conversation. And I've had people tell me that for the first time, because of Mr. Trashwheel, they started thinking about their own waste stream. People have told me they didn't recycle until they learned about Mr. Trashwheel and got involved in like his Reddit Ask Me Anything. And then they were like, wait, I should be recycling. So Mr. Trashwheel is promoting behavior change in people who maybe don't think about themselves as environmentalists.
Cool.
So I guess that's my advice. Find ways to cast a broader net. Don't be afraid to have fun. I mean, life there's plenty of things in life that aren't fun, right? So why not think about different ways that you can really be creative and get people excited about your mission.
Yeah. So looking forward, you guys have Mr. Trashwheel's birthday party coming up. There's the flotilla event happening in Baltimore. Would you like to touch on any of those things for listeners or anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, and we couldn't be more excited to have Rivers Are Life as a sponsor of this year's flotilla. The flotilla is another way, like, how do we break down barriers? If people legitimately think the harbor is toxic and untouchable and unknowable, what are we going to do to change those perceptions? And I mean, obviously, jumping in the harbor is a great way to do that because people see you swimming, and I'm hopeful that the more people who swim in the harbor, the more people are going to reevaluate what they think about water quality in the harbor. Flotilla is another, maybe more accessible way to do that, which is come on out and paddle with us. We've been hosting the flotilla since 2016. It's a paddling event for canoes, kayaks, and stand-up paddle boards. And last year we had about 325 people paddling from Canton Waterfront Park into the Inner Harbor. And then we had a rock band perform on Mr. Trash Wheel. So that was the first time we'd ever done anything like that. And it was so much fun. We had what I would call the world's largest performance of We Will Rock You on kayaks. So people were banging on their kayaks while a rock band was playing We Will Rock You. And it was just a tremendous day. The weather was beautiful. And we raised money and awareness about clean and accessible waterways. Another thing that we're doing is called the Baltimore Blueway, which is our master plan for creating a network of curated water trails around Baltimore Harbor. So the Inner Harbor, as the water's been getting cleaner, we want to find more ways for people to recreate in it. And honestly, paddling in the Baltimore Harbor is so much fun. I love kayaking and I love wetlands. I've seen a lot of wetlands. Wetlands are great. But man, coming into the heart of Baltimore City and seeing the skyscrapers and the historic ships, the National Aquarium, Mr. Trash Wheel in person, like seeing all of that from a kayak is just an amazing experience. And when you're getting splashed with harbor water, you're definitely thinking about, hey, what could I do to make this water cleaner? So getting people out of the water is, like, I think, really important to helping to really motivate others to take action to clean up waterways, including like local governments or state governments. Once you see, oh, people are using this waterway, there's a much greater incentive to take action to restore it.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to getting out on the water.
We will both be there.
Oh, that's awesome. That is terrific. Yeah, we'll make sure we got to get you guys on the list for you'll need kayaks.
Yeah, we will.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes.
That'd be great. I was a swimmer at one point in life competitively, but I do think I could maybe not swim all of that. A kayak would be helpful.
It's a 5-mile round trip. And, that's something we're trying to do with the Baltimore Blueway is add new access points to the Baltimore Harbor, because 5 miles is a big barrier for some people, whereas I think there's a lot of people who might be more comfortable pedaling 1 mile. So we're hoping to make that possible by adding new access points starting this spring.
Well, thank you, Adam. We really appreciate it. I know we've touched on a lot of things. It's always so nice to talk to you, hear about what's coming up. And I know, this is really just the beginning for Waterfront Partnership of Baltimore, for Mr. Trash Wheel. So yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate all that you guys do at Rivers Are Life as well.